Hey everyone, I'm Dane Sanders, and I want to welcome you back to Better Together from your city, whatever city that is. We are so glad that you are here, and I hope tonight's conversation is resourceful and helpful for you as you consider your life, your business, and where you're headed, and that this part of the conversation will be a contribution to that end. Now, if you were with us last month, you heard us talk about the law of change. In fact, I'm wearing the same t-shirt that I wore last month, which is ironic, and I'm in the same setting, but I wanted to just extend the conversation right now with a part two. It was too much to talk about this and that last month, and if you missed it, no problem. Talk with your leader and request to get access to that first video, because I think it might be helpful as we engage this idea. Now, to be fair, this idea is not my own. I took this idea and adapted it from a guy by the name of Henry Cloud. And if you're familiar with Boundaries, all the Boundaries books, he's a psychologist, and he wrote all those books. And he actually, I'm not aware of this being in any of his books, but he gave this as part of a talk several years ago, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And I heard it and adapted it. And so if there's anything good in this, Henry gets credit. If there's anything off in it, you can blame me. But let me explain a little bit about what we're going to call the four corners of the relational universe. Now, what's amazing about this idea of the four corners of the relational universe is that it encompasses every kind of relationship you are in or have been in any category, whether it's a person or a thing. So what that means is every relationship that I have with a human being or an object, and even like a pen, is entirely contained in this idea, and I'll explain. In fact, I'm going to explain how you and me, how I relate to everything and every person in the physical universe. Crazy claim, but I think it's going to be resourceful. Let's talk about it. So, I can relate with anything and any person in one of four ways. The first way we're going to call real. And if I'm relating with something in a real way, that means that I'm relating with it in the way it was supposed to be related with. It's appropriate. It's a legitimate need that I'm meeting legitimately. It's what things were made for. So, for example, if I had a pen, let's say this was a ballpoint pen or something like that, and I was relating with it in an appropriate way, what would that look like? What would I be doing with this pen? What was it made for? Well, it's a marker, so I'd be marking things up. That's what it was made for. I'd be relating with it appropriately, what it was made for. Now, if I took this same pen and it had a sharp edge to it, and I used it like a weapon, and I tried to hurt somebody with it, would you agree with me that that's not what that pen was made for? That I'm missing the mark on what it was supposed to be used for. In fact, I might have a legitimate need to defend myself with it, but it's the wrong tool for the job. Are you with me? So, if I'm relating with something in a real way, I'm relating with it in an appropriate way, what it was made for, the ultimate end, the highest and best use, the real. Now notice I didn't say good. I didn't put a value judgment of moral, like right, wrong, good, bad. It's just what it was made for. And that's what real is. And I could put any human being or anything in the category of real. The second way I want to talk about how I relate with things and people is a pseudo way. And a pseudo relationship, I have a lot of pseudo relationships over the course of my life. A pseudo relationship is a wannabe relationship. It's a poser. It's a legitimate need that I'm trying to meet illegitimately. It often comes in the form of gallons of ice cream if I'm depressed, or shopping sprees if I'm lonely. And maybe some of you guys are laughing and can relate with it. It's when you have a legitimate need, but you try to self-medicate. You try to apply something that it's not meant to do anything to help you ultimately, but it's not real, but it's not even bad. It's just pseudo. It's a step in. It's something that's going to cover the base we think, but it never really satisfies. So an example of this might be, you need a hug, but you eat a cookie because you're too afraid to ask for a hug in case you don't get it. That kind of thing. And if you're in that kind of a situation, just notice that that's pretty human. A lot of folks have pseudo relationships, and when you're awake to them and you have a vision for what a real relationship could look like in its place, and you have the courage to go for the real, guess what? You really have a chance then to get what you're longing for, what you really are craving. Now, Now, the third kind of relationship we're going to call a bad relationship. And a bad relationship is when I relate to a thing or a person in a destructive way. In fact, it's the same thing as a pseudo relationship, except for, in this case, the bad relationship has dramatic negative effects. So I'll give you some examples of this in just a second, but just notice a bad relationship is also a legitimate need that I'm trying to meet illegitimately, but it's not like a cookie or a thing of ice cream. It's like heroin. It's like hurting other people or hurting myself. That's a bad relationship. Are you with me so far? Well, and if you're wondering what this has to do with photography, hang with me for a minute because you'll see in a second why it's so significant. The final relationship is a zero relationship. And a zero relationship is when I've had something in my life and it gets pulled out of my life and it never found its way home to what is real. And it stayed in this zero place. And when something stays in a zero place, it actually can't stay there. In fact, what happens is a zero relationship necessarily, in fact, the one rule of the four corners of the relational universe is that humans can't stay in a zero relationship. So let me give you an example. I'm 3 years old and my dad dies in a car accident. And I had this dad who now is out of my life. And I went to a zero relationship. And when dad died, the truth is, especially as a 3-year-old and through the course of life, I didn't have the opportunity to stay in that zero relationship. In fact, I've had a relationship with my dad over and over and over again with these proxies. I've related with my dad as a coach, as with my mom, just a bunch of different people in my life that were kind of trying to play that role, or I wanted them to be in that role. Another classic example is, has anyone ever had a rebound relationship where you're basically dating the same person you were dating, but this time it's a new person, even though it feels like you're dating the same person over and over again? The classic example of this, which is so destructive, is when someone has a bad relationship. Like, have you ever heard of someone, let's say they're in a domestic abuse situation, and some woman is being beat by this guy, beat down, and she finally has the courage to kick the bum out. And she goes from a bad relationship, you'd agree that's a bad relationship, to a zero relationship. In that zero relationship, the one rule is you can't stay in a zero relationship. So guess what this woman does within 21, 28 days? She goes back to the bum, or a bum just like him. And she goes back to a bad relationship. Now, she might have the courage to trade in the bum relationship for something a little better, but still isn't the real. But it's less destructive, so I say, good for you. Go for the pseudo. But don't we all really crave the real in every relationship in our lives? Whether it be a spouse, whether it be a relationship with money, with relationship to food, with relationship to power, with relationship to freedom. In all of these ideas and things and people, we want to have real, what we were made for, appropriate. But sometimes we settle, don't we? We settle for something that's not quite as much as it could be. And we're going to call that pseudo or bad, or if it's out of our life, it's zero. Now here's the good news. There's the opportunity to take a look at our lives with all of our relationships with things and people, including your clients, including how you relate to your photography skill and craft, including how you relate to the business side of things, including how you relate to seeing light, including how you engage with a customer who is complaining. In all cases, these are relationships with things and people, and the goal is to have a real relationship with each of these things and people. But sometimes people feel stuck, right? Like, no, I can't get past the pseudo. This is all I got. Well, what if you could? What if you applied the formula for change, or the law for change, and looked really carefully at, why am I not living in the real? What if your vision is low when it comes to what the real could look like? What if you could ask your colleagues who are in the room tonight what real could look like, and you took a chance and tried to raise the stakes on what your vision was? What if in the course of raising the stakes of what your vision was and you got clearer on it, you became dissatisfied increasingly with the way things are currently? By the law of change, from what we talked about last month, that would be good news. Because with vision, as that goes up and dissatisfaction goes up, well, guess what? So will your plan on what one thing you need to do next, just like my friend Mark Hayes did when his one thing was, just put pictures of yourself up on the internet, and guess what? You're going to find some motivation to go pay the price to see change happen. And you see what I'm saying. Now, if you don't get my explanation of the formula for change or the law for change, again, that's last month's video. I hope it's helpful for those of you who did see it. But for our conversation, just notice You have the power within you right now, in everything and every person, especially the relationships that are popping to mind right now, to move from a zero to a real, to move from a bad to a real, and to move from a zero to a real, a bad to a real, and a pseudo to a real. Just like you can be in a real relationship and have it go pseudo, have it go bad, or have it go zero, or even go from a zero to a bad, or a bad to a pseudo, or backwards. But in all cases, our interest is to find a way to get to the real. Because in the real, what we discover is we land with what we're made for. This could be your style as a photographer. This could be your commitment long haul to have a thriving, vibrant, viable business. Like, what would the real version of that business look like? Are you just shooting one genre of something, pseudo, because you're too afraid to go for what you know you were made for, but you know it's going to take a risk on your part? And I wonder if in tonight's conversation you could take these ideas and take the law of change that we talked about last month and consider, maybe for the first time, what it is that you really want to go for. What could that look like, both in your business and your life? I have a hunch as you lean in with your leaders tonight, you're going to find a lot of resource, a lot of interesting conversation. And my encouragement is for you to make some declarations tonight about what you're committed to. And I think some really cool things will open up.